reasons Canadian issues loom less large is because Canada hasn't kept up with the sort of investments that would make the country useful and relevant to an American administration. Brian Mulroney didn't have a good relationship with Ronald Reagan merely because they were friends and Brian Mulroney sang "When Irish Eyes Are Smiling." It's because Canada had the resources and the capacity to play a key role around the world, advancing, shared interests with the United States. Today, that's much more challenging for various reasons. This is not a criticism of the current government. I mean, successive governments have kind of underinvested in those capacities, and that's sort of left Canada less relevant to the American administration. So in some ways, when we look ahead and ask ourselves, how can we restore the type of bilateral relationship between Canada and the U.S. that we saw under the Mulroney era, some of that involves issues for which we ourselves can't resolve, namely, what's going on in Washington. But some of it we can resolve. The United States takes interest and takes note of partners who have the capacity to make a contribution. And that's something, again, collectively, all our party leaders should be committed to investing in because it's ultimately in the interest of our country.
Sean Speer, thanks for all that.
It was a pleasure joining you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
That's all for this week. The Cost of Living is based in Calgary. The show is produced by Danielle Nerman, Ellis Cho, and Jennifer Keene, with help from Caroline the Fightin' Alligator Ferris. Our executive producer is Tracy Johnson. I'm Paul Haberstrood. Thanks for listening.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Nellie Furtado, and I'm bringing the party to the 2024 Juno Awards. Join me in Halifax for Canada's biggest night in music with performances by my friends, The Beaches, Maestro Fresh West, Charlotte Cardin, and me. It's a party you're never gonna forget. Promise, you know?
Don't miss the 2024 Juno Awards live from Halifax. Sunday, March 24th at 8 Eastern on CBC and CBC Gem.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC...
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 13 degrees with sunny skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. The Manitoba government is putting the brakes on grade 10 and 12 provincial exams for next year. The Department of Education sent memos to superintendents of school divisions last week. It wants to meet with educators to redevelop how students are assessed. Matt Henderson is the superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division, the largest division in the province. He agrees with the move.
Whether it's in grade 9, 10, 11, 12, we just have to be really, really clear about what is it that we're evaluating. What is it that we're assessing? And then how do we create a provincial-wide system that captures that data? And that's actually useful for systems to get in order for them to get better at teaching.
Henderson says that doesn't mean an end to exams, tests, or final presentations in grade 12. Grade 10 and 12 exams will be held this year. A new report from the Right to Housing Coalition says the province already has the financial tools to address homelessness and the housing crisis. Right now, almost 6,000 low-income households are on the wait list for social housing. Kirsten Bernass with the coalition says the province must address this in its upcoming budget.
It's time for Manitoba to stop relying on the private market to produce low-rent housing. This approach, taken over the last 30 years, has clearly failed, and there are growing calls across the country for governments at all levels to reinvest in non-market social housing.
The new report says the Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation already has strategies to increase social housing supplies. That includes fixing existing stock. The corporation can borrow money at lower rates and have longer mortgages, both keys to financing social housing. There are now 17 confirmed cases of measles in Canada. Quebec's public health director confirmed 10 cases and says only 3 are linked to travel outside of the country, which means there is community spread. There are 5 confirmed cases in Ontario, 1 in BC, and 1 in Saskatchewan. Infectious disease experts say a small number of measles cases can escalate to widespread infections. And as measles makes a comeback in Canada, Manitoba health officials worry it will come here. Dr. Joss Reimer is the president-elect of the Canadian Medical Association. She says part of the reason for the comeback of the virus is a drop in vaccination rates. Reimer says some infants missed their shots during COVID, and some adults also may not have had their shots. Reimer says there's always a way to check.
All of the physicians in Manitoba have access to immunization records. So not only can you call your public health office, your local public health office, who can look that up for you, but your physician will also be able to look that up for you and tell you if you've had 0 doses, 1 dose, 2 doses, and they can help get you caught up if you need to be.
Reimer says in order to have herd immunity, the vaccination rate needs to be over 90%. She says Manitoba has fallen far short of that. To the United States now.
With Trump, it's a situation of uncertainty, and I'm not prepared for uncertainty.
Joe Biden. Overall, I think he done a great job regardless of what people think of his age.
That's a couple of voters in Alabama on today, Super Tuesday. It's the largest voting day of the year before the November general election. Voters in 16 states and 1 territory will choose who they want to run for president. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump are poised to move much closer to winning their party's nominations. Ottawa has released more details for the planned funeral of Brian Mulroney. Canada's 18th Prime Minister, who served from 1984 to 1993, died last week at the age of 84. Marina von Steckelberg has your details.
The Prime Minister's office calls Brian Mulroney a champion of the values that unite Canadians and a Prime Minister who will forever be remembered as a force for the common good. Mulroney's state funeral will take place in just under 3 weeks on Saturday, March 23rd in Montreal. Before that, Mulroney will lie in state in Montreal and Ottawa. That likely means Canadians will have a chance to line up and view his casket in person to pay their respects. More details of the ceremonies are expected later. A commemorative webpage and book of condolences for the public to sign are also now online. State funerals are special public events reserved for eminent Canadians, including past prime ministers. The last state funeral in Canada was held in January for former NDP leader Ed Broadbent. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Meta says several of their services are now recovering from disruptions. This morning, Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram were down for hundreds of thousands of users. In a post on social media on X, a Meta spokesperson says users were having trouble logging in. In the past hour, the company says the problem has been resolved and access is now being restored. And finally, there won't be a Just for Laughs comedy festival in Montreal this year. The company that owns the festival has filed for protection from its creditors as it begins formal restructuring under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act. It's blaming the pandemic, inflation, and the changing entertainment industry. And it says it hopes the festival will return next year. In Winnipeg, we're seeing sunny skies today with a light wind and a high of minus 10 degrees. In Brandon, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of minus 13. Dauphin, a high of minus 13. Mainly sunny. Flin Flon, sunshine, a high of minus 14. And in Thompson, you're seeing a few clouds with a high of minus 15.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Well, coming up this hour on the show, well, we do like to say here in Manitoba that we have a dry cold, but it's been much drier than normal this winter. We're going to hear what this recent snowstorm, though, means for farmers in the province and hopefully a little more moisture for the growing season. But first, this half hour on the show, a local organization wants Manitobans to rethink how we built social housing in our province. We're going to hear what they found at 12:15. And up first, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs says the province should have consulted them before making changes to Manitoba's bail system. Grand Chief Kathy Merrick joins us up first here on Radio Noon. Well, after the province introduced a new plan to keep people on bail from reoffending, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs says it was left out of the consultation process. Manitoba's Attorney General and Justice Minister Matt Wiebe announced last week that the 5-point plan includes $3 million for 12 police officers who will focus on tracking down people who repeatedly violate their bail conditions. Also, Crown attorneys will have more tools for considering the potential impact on victims and the community if someone accused of a crime is let out on bail while awaiting judgment. But AMC Grand Chief Kathy Merrick says the plan lacks insight from First Nations communities, and she joins us now. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So,
thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So, just to start here, in your opinion, what's this plan missing?
Well, this plan is missing a whole lot of things in terms of participation from First Nation leadership. And as the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, we speak on behalf of the 62 First Nations in Manitoba. And it was pretty surprising that we were not involved in any of the development of a plan regarding the provincial bail system reform.
And in terms of, the things you'd like to see more of in this plan, to benefit First Nations community, or at least, to help include the needs of First Nations communities, what would you like to see?
I'd like to see the involvement of my political organization being involved in the process and being able to contribute as to what we hear and what we see in First Nation communities in terms of a plan for a provincial bail system reform. It affects our people. Our people are affected, and we need to ensure that we be able to speak on their behalf and that we be able to ensure that we're inclusive in any discussion.
And if the province included you in those discussions, what kind of things would you have suggested?
We would bring issues from that we hear from our leadership, from our chiefs, as to actually what happens in the First Nation communities. There's a lot of information that is being brought forth, and we need to be able to relay that information to governments, both the provincial government and the federal government. And it's the lack thereof of services in First Nations as well. And just recently, there was a resolution that was passed by the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs in Assembly. And that resolution directs the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs to initiate a tripartite process with Canada and Manitoba to fully implement the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry. As we very well know, this document and all the hard work that has been put forward has kind of been left in abeyance. So we need to be able to ensure that we speak to the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry.
And what would that kind of that particularly Aboriginal justice kind of look like? I know kind of in the statement you released earlier, you spoke more about making reconciliation a focus. What would that look like in practice?
Well, we call upon all governments to immediately implement the recommendations in relation to the Canadian justice system in bridging and cultural divide, a report on Aboriginal peoples and criminal justice in Canada, Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, and the report of the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry here in Manitoba. So the administration of justice and our people need to be focused on, and that we be able to ensure that we participate, and that we be able to ensure that we speak to the issues that affect First Nations. And a lot of these issues as well are directly impact this reform. So they need to be able to be inclusive in any discussion when we talk about bail system reform.
Because you said, the plan, particularly this bail reform plan, lacks a rehabilitative focus. What do you mean by that?
It affects our. We all very well know that the justice system does not work for our people, and that we know, and we have done research, and we have done a lot of good things where we are able to ensure that our people that come out of the system, the justice, the institutionalized processes that we have for our people, that we be able to ensure that they come back to the community in a good way. But those processes are missing, where people are being released from the institutions. There's no contact with First Nations as to how their people are being released from the institutions.
Now, my colleague Ian Fraze, he just actually put your concerns to the minister, to Matt Wiebe, just kind of mentioning what we have earlier. And his response, just to kind of sum it up, he says consultation is ongoing. They'll continue to look at ways to consult with First Nations communities. Now, you say that this lack of consultation, actually violates the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. Can you explain what this means and what you'd actually like to see from the province going forward?
Okay, it's a violation of UNDRIP, the failure to properly consult AMC member First Nations and to actually involve AMC on these plans that are being produced by the province. And it's a violation of UNDRIP under 15.2, which states shall take effect measures in consultation and cooperation with the Indigenous peoples concerned. So this is where I come from as the Grand Chief, that we be able to be consulted, and that we be able to cooperate in these manners. And further to that, it also states that to consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples concerned through our own representative institutions. So free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect us.
So how far? So how far should this duty to consult go? Do you think should it be, in every single decision, or what should the limitations be?
When it affects our people, it should be something that should be first and foremost. So when you're going to talk about my people, we should be at the table to talk about my people.
And I mean, a lot of the government decisions do touch on First Nations issues. So should that be everything, or where's the boundaries of this consultation process? Do you think
there are no boundaries? Like I said, if we're going to talk about First Nation people, we should be there to talk about First Nation people and the effects of any legislation, any policies that come to our people.
I know now this new government, they've been in power since October. How included, because this is the first time I know that you've kind of spoke publicly about, feeling left out of the decision-making process. How included have you felt in government decisions up to this point since the NDP took power in October?
Earlier, we were very happy with the new government, and we were just waiting for them to kind of come into a grips of as to the representation here in the province. But we have met with the Premier, and we have met with ministers, and we have relayed the information on how to be inclusive in any decisions that are being made on behalf of our First Nation people. So we're there, but it has to be done more so, and that we have to ensure as well that when it comes to addressing First Nation people in the province of Manitoba, that we be there to be able to speak, and that we be able to be there to listen as well.
Grand Chief Merrick, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Kathy Merrick is Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. Time now is 12:16.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you when it happens.
And how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Still to come on the show, we're going to hear what this recent snowstorm means for Manitoba farmers. Also, just ahead, a local organization wants Manitobans to rethink how we build social housing in our province. We're going to hear what their recent report found coming up here on the show. But first, let's take a look at your current conditions across the province. And it's still a fairly chilly, wintry day out there here in Manitoba. Brandon, right now at the airport, you're sitting at minus 18, mainly sunny. Churchill, sunny, minus 20 for you right now. Dauphin at the airport, light snow, minus 18. Flin Flon, mainly sunny, minus 16. Gillam, minus 19, mainly sunny. Island Lake, sunny, minus 15. You're noticing a trend of sunny at least. Lynn Lake, sunny, minus 19. Norway House, minus 14. Pinawa, minus 11 right now. Sprague, you're a hot spot this afternoon. Shout out to Travis Peterson, who's from Sprague and behind the YouTube controls, minus 8 right now in Sprague. Cold spot to Dooley Lake, minus 21 and sunny. And Thompson at the airport, light snow, minus 19. Winnipeg, partly cloudy and minus 14. Well, Canada is in an affordable housing crisis, and Manitoba is no exception. We're simply not building enough affordable housing units to keep up with demand. And wait lists for affordable low-income homes in Manitoba have doubled over the last 5 years. That has the Winnipeg-based Right to Housing Coalition looking for solutions. And just over an hour ago, it released a report entitled Thinking Inside the Box, Rediscovering How to Build Social Housing in Manitoba. Here's Lynn Fernandez explaining what their organization found. She's the co-author of the Seniors Working Group for the Right to Housing Coalition.
That we're releasing this report is not really anything to celebrate. In fact, it's actually frustrating and even tragic. We have known for at least a century that private developers and landlords have no reason to build for or rent to people with little money. In fact, as documented by Doug Smith's book on the history of social housing in Winnipeg, the city's business community actively opposed the building of public housing for decades. That opposition was not overcome until the 1970s and 80s, when more enlightened provincial and federal governments collaborated to build more than 1,000 units of social housing per year, culminating in more than 11,000 units. The Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation, a Crown corporation formed in 1969, became the province's premier resource for the provision and control of public housing. But this more favorable housing environment was not to last. By the 1990s, when free market principles took governments by storm, Canada's federal government quit the social housing file and left the provinces to shoulder the responsibility themselves. Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation, in collaboration with the nonprofit housing sector, has been struggling to meet its mandate ever since. Housing advocates have been frustrated by the lack of action for a long time, culminating in the release of the Right to Housing's Social Action Plan last August, the report that Kirsten referred to. After the release, I was tasked with preparing a follow-up to explain how Manitoba should and could finance the action plan outlined in the report. I had followed Right to Housing's analysis since its inception and broadly understood the need for public or nonprofit housing with non-market, rent-geared to income that's no more than 30% of household income. But I needed to dig deeper to figure out how government could finance Right to Housing's recommendations. So I pursued 3 lines of inquiry. The first source I pursued was with Right to Housing colleagues when we attended an international social housing conference in Barcelona last June. There were housing experts from across the developed world. Everyone had come to the same conclusion. Governments had to get on board. And everyone agreed that public housing was infrastructure. I was taken by how much Right to Housing's 2-decade analysis was reflected by so many other experts. Secondly, I did a lot of reading by experts in the field from various parts of the world. The consensus was that governments use grants and long-term public loans to invest in social housing. A report from Australia found that, and I'm quoting, infrastructure such as social housing has traditionally attracted public investment in the form of grants and long-term, low-cost public loans. Such direct public investment is allocated from general government revenue and raised via treasuries or specialist public sector banks. Public investment is not an expense. Rather, it is an investment in the public state. It creates value and can be recycled via active asset management to contribute to revolving equity and loan programs. So that quote fit, and that whole report from Australia fit very nicely with what we learned in Barcelona. My third stage was to think about how all I had learned so far would apply to Manitoba. And I thought that this was going to be the hardest part by far. It turned out to be far easier than I thought it would be. In fact, when I went to the Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation website, it almost seemed as if someone had done that research for me. There it was, as plain as day. All the tools we needed, many of the strategies discussed in the literature and the conference were hiding right there in plain sight. This is what the Crown is legislated to do. Enhance the affordability of and accessibility to adequate housing for Manitobans, particularly those of low to moderate incomes or those with specialized needs. Maintain and improve the condition of existing housing stock. Ensure there is an adequate supply of housing stock in Manitoba. So how does the Crown fulfill that mandate? This also from the website. In fulfilling its mandate, Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation has the capacity to engage in many activities, including constructing and developing new and affordable housing, rehabilitating existing housing in areas of need, acquiring and disposing of land or buildings, making grants and loans, managing finances, including the investment and borrowing of funds and the provision of loan guarantees, creating and overseeing the operations of local housing authorities, and entering into intergovernmental agreements for renewal schemes and renewal projects for which provision is made under the National Housing Act. So on one hand, I had evidence-based research from various sources that recommended a variety of strategies and policies, and on the other hand, I had an in-house Crown Corporation that was mandated to use those exact strategies and policies. There was really nothing difficult here. The two pieces just snapped into place. So this became my task, to revisit Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation's legislated mandate with fresh eyes and convince government to leverage it to meet Manitobans' housing needs. In other words, to wake politicians up to the resources they have under their noses and light a fire under them. They shouldn't be trying to think outside the proverbial box, forget the private market, quit looking for some magical formula. The only working strategy is inside the public and nonprofit box. We know how to do this.
Lynn Fernandez is co-chair of the Seniors Working Group for the Right to Housing Coalition. If you'd like to check that report out yourself, you can find it at righttohousing.ca. Well, time now is 12:26 here on Radio Noon. And before we get to your news, we got some time for a bit of music. Elliot Maginot discovered the guitar as a teenager, and encouraged by his brother, he began creating music on his own, layering a variety of sounds on his computer, like you kind of hear now. Maginot's latest album is called I Need to Stay Here, and from it, here he is with For the Living.
Wake me from this fever dream, Lord, pull me out of here. Take it from this dream of female, from everything I hold dear. There's nothing here worth living for, there's nothing for living. And just paid attention to the noise. The time has come to heed the call now, and I can hide it, I can hide it. So won't you go on, go on, go on, go on, without me now. My mind is numb, my soul is tired, faith is wearing thin. Where's my bird on the wire, God? Please don't let them win. There's no more bridge to burn down now. Just let me stay here. Just let me stay here. Won't you go on, go on, go on, go on, without me now. Won't you go on, go on, just go on, go on, without me now. Won't you go on, go on, just go on, go on, without me now. Won't you go on, go on, go on, go on, without me now.
Do you hear that sound of kids laughing and playing and screaming in the background? Sounds a lot like my house these days. That was Elliot Maginot in Montreal with For the Living. His new album is called I Need to Stay Here, and it comes out on March 22nd. I'm going to be checking that one out. I love that. It's 12:29 right now. Still lots to come here on Radio Noon, like a British company who wants to bring back the glory days of bowling. But can it roll a strike on Canadian lanes? We're going to bring that story coming up this half hour. Plus, I know commuters must have been kind of shaking their fists at the weather this last weekend, but farmers are a little happier about it. We're going to hear from the president of Keystone Agricultural Producers about what this snow has meant for farmers, especially after this dry winter so far. That's all coming up right here on Radio Noon. But first, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at minus 12 degrees with mostly blue skies over downtown Winnipeg. It's good to be with you this afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. Manitoba health officials are reminding people to check their vaccination records to make sure they're protected against measles. The virus is on the rise in Canada, with more than a dozen cases being reported. So far, most are in Quebec. Dr. Joss Reimer says vaccination rates have slipped in Manitoba over the past few years. She says measles is very contagious and can hang in the air for up to 2 hours after an infectious person is in the room. Reimer says if you're traveling for spring break, it's especially important to be up to date with your shots.
If folks are going to Europe, if they're going to Quebec, and many other parts of the world, it is possible to bring it back. And we know that our vaccine rates are lower than they should be. You really need about 90% of the population to be immune to prevent a measles outbreak, and we're not there.
Reimer says physicians and public health will be able to tell you if you or your children have been vaccinated. A new report from the Right to Housing Coalition has started a postcard writing campaign to pressure the government to allocate more money to social housing. The group says the Manitoba Housing and Renewal Corporation has all the tools to build and maintain more public housing. But the coalition's Lynn Fernandez says the government must provide more funding in the upcoming budget.
To wake politicians up to the resources they have under their noses and light a fire under them. They shouldn't be trying to think outside the proverbial box, forget the private market, quit looking for some magical formula. The only working strategy is inside the public and nonprofit box.
A new report by Fernandez says the Housing and Renewal Corporation can borrow money at lower rates and have longer mortgages, both keys to financing social housing. Meanwhile, an increasing number of Canadians aren't able to pay their mortgages and are missing payments. That's according to a new report from Equifax Canada. Nisha Patel breaks it down for us.
We're a little bit more concerned this quarter.
Rebecca Oakes tracks money trends for Equifax Canada. She says more Canadians missed mortgage payments in the latest quarter, with delinquency rates climbing 52% over last year. Mortgage holders in Ontario and BC, where house prices are much higher, have been hardest hit by steep interest rates.
We're starting to see those missed payments really going above what we had before the pandemic.
Oakes says anyone who renewed their mortgage recently saw their mortgage payment jump an average of $457. And those feeling financial stress are also missing credit card payments more often. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Back soon.
That's Matt Humphrey at our CBC News Desk. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marjorie Dowhouse. And in studio with me now is our CBC weather specialist, Riley Lachuk, who has a look at what I think is a little bit more of a straightforward forecast than it has been the past few days.
Yeah, a little bit more certainty.
I like that.
With the exception of tomorrow, because there is some snow in the forecast tomorrow, and the model guidance still not really agreeing on where the heaviest snow will hit or even how much. The most guidance that I have to give you is that it will snow somewhere in southern Manitoba tomorrow. We'll get into the details.
I like that.
We'll get into the details. We'll keep it general. So we're at minus 13 in Winnipeg right now. Brandon's at minus 18, as is Thompson. Minus 20s for both Tadouli Lake and Churchill. And to give you a sense, this is quite a bit below seasonal for this time of the year. We should be at about minus 4 in the afternoon for Winnipeg. So a little bit below normal. That's because we've seen clear and sunny skies, and that has allowed the heat that we generate during the day to escape into space at night. So it keeps us a little bit cooler. We will start to see some cloud, though, building in as we get into Wednesday. So for the rest of Tuesday, we're looking at a mainly sunny sky, really province-wide. It's not till we get into Wednesday that we see another area of low pressure moving in. This one skirting along the international border, bringing snow into the western part of Manitoba, which, of course, is still cleaning up from that last dump of snow. First thing in the morning, the model guidance right now is showing, though, that we'll start to see some of that snow moving into the Winnipeg region around the noon hour on Wednesday. So expect some light snow through the afternoon tomorrow. At this point, the models are keeping the heaviest of the snow southeast of Winnipeg into the southeast corner of the province and into northwestern Ontario. Still, though, light snow at this point. Pretty good chance of that across southern Manitoba through the afternoon Wednesday into Wednesday evening. That clears out. Thursday, we start mainly cloudy, and we start to see a little bit more sunshine as we head into the afternoon on Thursday. So today's forecast looking at minus 10 for Winnipeg. Could even get as high as minus 9 around the city this afternoon, especially in the downtown area. But generally, I'm thinking of minus 10 around the region through today. Minus 13 in Brandon and minus 14 with some lingering flurries in Thompson. And looking at the next few days, I've got Winnipeg in for 3 to 7 centimeters for Wednesday with a high of -1. Clearing Thursday with a high of -7, and then temperatures closer to that seasonal mark as we head into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and a little bit more sunshine, Corey.
I don't know why every March I think, okay, like winter's over now, and then all of a sudden you keep telling me we're getting more snow.
Yeah,
It's still
well,
gonna be cold.
we've gotten blizzards even into April before.
And I think even May, I remember even as a kid, a couple snowstorms. So I know, and every year you'd think I'd learn, and as soon as May comes around, I'm like, it's done, and then nope, catch me off guard.
Yeah, we're playing catch up for everything that we missed earlier in the season.
Makes sense. Well, Riley, thank you very much.
No problem.
That's our CBC weather specialist, Riley Lachuk. Well, while commuters cursed that storm that walloped much of southwestern Manitoba this past weekend, farmers are feeling a little bit more relief. And when all was said and done, if you're wondering, the Brandon area saw 22 to 29 centimeters of snow, according to Environment Canada. Verdun saw 25 centimeters, and Roblin saw 23 centimeters. And as you kind of go further east, accumulations got kind of less and less. Well, Jill Verway farms near Portage la Prairie and is president of Keystone Agricultural Producers, and she spoke with CBC's Rachel Firstall about what all this snow has meant for farmers.
Well, I think this winter we've had unseasonably dry weather, and in most cases, overall on the average, probably lack of snowfall. So very welcome to see that additional moisture. And hoping that, coming into the springtime, we'll get some more seasonable rain when it's time to get out to the field and or after we get the crop in the ground. So other than, I guess, causing some real havoc and some tremendous, traveling for people in the area over the weekend, probably caused some disruptions there and some maybe power outages. And but certainly the moisture is welcome.
Were there any other cities kind of in southwest Manitoba that have declared a drought? I know Morden has.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on. I know that the CAP office has been working very closely with Manitoba Agriculture, monitoring the situation, hoping to provide some boots on the ground knowledge as to farmers that are being affected by the lack of rain and moisture going into the spring, and I think we try to position ourselves where we can provide some insight going into if there are some in cases really lack of moisture and drought conditions, so that we ensure that we've got the right programming and information out there for farmers going into this year's seeding time.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that just overall in kind of the southwest area, those areas have just been seeing a dry season.
Yeah, I think we've actually over the last 3 years, particularly, the Southwest has been hit, with unseasonably really a drier crop year. And we've also seen, areas even in the Interlake and even in the Northwest where, it's kind of, it can be very regional in the areas that it affects. But I know the rain that we had over the last growing season in 2023 was fairly sporadic in that, it was even, from one side of the road to the other, there could be a drastic change in whether or not they were able to get some rain. So, crop yields were definitely affected that, from that standpoint. But I know that the weather systems, even from Manitoba straight through to the southern parts of Saskatchewan, right into the southern, southwest corner of Alberta, definitely we've been monitoring, the lack of moisture this year, and particularly in the Morden area where they rely, to great extent in the Morden area with water out of their regional water, where they saw real drought conditions last year, and without any real moisture this winter, looking at some significant issues going into this year's growing season.
Mm-hmm. So come the springtime, if you could just kind of spell it out for me, how does this big dump of snow help farmers?
It will melt off, I guess, to a great extent if we can have a slow melting period in the spring, so that we can take advantage of some of this water sticking around rather than running off, I guess, would be the ideal situation. And so you always hope for that slow melting period in the spring, so that you can take advantage of some of that moisture definitely sticking around. And then if we can have some seasonal rain, in the month of April prior to getting out to the field, then that should filter down and stick around, and we'll be ready to get crop in the ground.
Jill Verwey is president of Keystone Agricultural Producers. She was speaking with CBC's Rachel Firstel.
Communities in Focus is back. CBC wants to get to know the communities we serve a little better, and this time we're coming to St. Laurent. I'm Emily Brass. Join me March 11th to 15th and share the stories of your community. Let's find out what St. Laurent is all about. Communities in Focus. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
12:41 right now. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Well, according to Indigenous designers Leslie Hampton and Evan Ducharme, fashion is about more than clothes. It's also about building community and pushing style boundaries. Fashion can empower and inspire people through accurately representing the diversity in our world. But it hasn't always been that way. When Leslie and Evan were children, they never saw themselves represented in the fashion industry. Now, they're bringing the change they want to see to the international runways. Evan Ducharme is a Métis artist and designer whose work is centered around Métis history. He was raised in St. Ambrose, Manitoba, and is based in Winnipeg. Leslie is an Anishinaabe based in Toronto from Temagami First Nation in Northern Ontario.
The first time I became interested in fashion, I was watching Jeannie Becker on fashion television. I was in the basement of my house in Newfoundland, and it's really the only connection that I had to the fashion world, to the mainstream pop culture world. But even at the age of 10 years old, I really noticed that it was one skin type, one body type. And I didn't feel like I felt included in that space. So fashion always became it was always a dream for me, but it never felt like a tangible reality. It was really this idea of bringing inclusivity to the runway, so that I could almost rectify what I was seeing as a 10-year-old in Newfoundland and really rectify that for the next generation of youth growing up and seeing fashion and hopefully feeling included in the fashion industry.
Yeah, that definitely resonates a lot with me as well. Growing up in St. Ambrose, I wasn't, the closest metropolitan center was Winnipeg. In the 90s, when I was a kid, the world was a lot more insular. We were like the generation that first was educated with the internet and computers. As that technology expanded and, satellite TV came to St. Ambrose, it was film and television that really showed me the power of clothes and the narratives that can be built with clothes. I also didn't see a space for myself in fashion as a child. It was teachers that I had growing up who told me, this is a real job. You can go out into the world and do this. There's, you can go to university for this. This is a career path. And I had my Auntie Annette who worked in garment production here in Winnipeg and really laid the foundation for me in learning how to make a garment and the importance of working with a client and knowing how to make clothes for all different body types, and really laid that foundation for me when I entered the industry.
Leslie Hampton and Evan Ducharme are Indigenous artists and designers pushing the boundaries of the mainstream fashion industry. From runways in Milan and New York Fashion Week, Unreserved with Rosanna Deerchild is taking a peek into the Indigenous fashion world on this week's episode. Unreserved airs today at 1 p.m. right after Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. You can also listen anytime on the CBC Listen app. Time now is 12:45. We've got time for a little bit of music here. And here's some new music from Montreal band Half Moon Run. From their live from the Treehouse EP, this is Can't Stop Loving You. You're hearing it right here on CBC Radio 1. Half Moon Run with Can't Stop Loving You. I was kind of getting a little bit of April Wine in there, maybe some influence. That's what was kind of coming to mind there. Yeah, maybe Canadian, both Canadian. Who knows? It's 12:49 right now here on Radio Noon, and it's been 50 or 60 years since the golden age of bowling. That sport's popularity has slowly been fading ever since, but now a British company is buying up some of Canada's oldest and crustiest lanes. CBC producer Danielle Nerman explains why it's banking on bowling to make a comeback.
You're really good. Kathy Wrights has been bowling 3 times in the last month, so I'm pretty sure she's gonna cream me.
I guess we'll see how much you actually suck, because I think even someone who's bowled for a long time, it's a level playing field.
That's what Kathy loves about bowling. Anyone can do it. Her friends, her kids, grandma, grandpa, and...
Bowling is really still affordable. You can do a family of 4 for still under $100. Whereas a few hours at the ski hill, you're probably over $300, $400.
You're picking a heavy object and chucking it down a lane and knocking things over. What's not to like?
Stephen Burns is the CEO of the Hollywood Bowl Group, the largest bowling operator in the UK. 2 years ago, it started buying up old bowling alleys across Canada and fixing them up for a new generation. Not hardcore league players, but people who may have tried it once or twice.
In the UK, 98.6% of people have bowled at some point in their lives. In Canada, from the customer research that we did, it was actually closer to 100%. It's something that everybody has done.
Stephen Burns says after the pandemic, everyone was itching to get out. We're now spending less on stuff and more on fun. But
they don't want to go somewhere where it's a dark, dingy, feet sticking to the carpets and an outdated experience.
They want new arcade games, online booking systems, and better food.
Not just, greasy fries and a terrible cheeseburger. We're talking about, places that have ahi tuna.
Bill Snowberger is with U.S. Bowling. He says the sport is having a moment. His company renovates alleys all over the U.S. and Canada, and business has been good.
We normally have slow seasons, where November, December, January, and February, that's kind of our slow time where we can catch our breath, replenish our inventory, give our installers some time off. Hasn't happened in 2 years. It's year-round for us right now.
While many bowling centers are getting a facelift, many have also just disappeared. In the last 20 years, Canada has lost more than 200 bowling alleys. A lot of owners retired and sold the land to developers. But the Hollywood Bowl Group is hoping to slow that trend. Next month, it will open its 12th location in Canada with plans to build and reno at least 20 more over the next decade. And that's A-OK with Kathy Wrights.
I've been to some of the oldest bowling alleys that have never really been cleaned up, and I've been to some of the newer ones, and what an experience having those nice computers. I've learned how to tally on a piece of paper, but if I don't have to do that anymore, that's so great.
What's not so great? My score.
Well, yeah, maybe we need to just strengthen up your arms a little bit. Uh-oh.
For the cost of living, I'm Danielle Gutterball Nerman.
Well, for more stories about money and the economic forces that surround us, you can subscribe to CBC's Cost of Living podcast. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Gotta love bowling. I haven't been in a long time, but it's a good time, and especially the glow bowling. It feels like a party. And maybe here's a little bit of a song that might make you want to glow bowl a little bit. Here's Winnipeg 8-piece band, the Sunrunner, with a groovy tune. Take a listen. Here's Feel You All Around. Yeah, I'd knock down a few pins to this.
sound. I guess I knew that the days would disappear when they said we would play it by ear. But I wish I knew that I would have no clue how to live without I guess I knew that the days would disappear when they said we would play it by ear. But I wish I knew that I would have no clue how to live without. I guess I knew that the days would disappear when they said they would play it by ear. But I wish I knew that I would have no clue how to live without you.
That's the Sunrunner with Feel You All Around. That's some pretty good glow bowling music, don't you think, Chloe Friesen?
I could definitely glow bowl to that song.
Yeah. I'm used to
strike.
some top 40, but generally, I think this is pretty good glow bowling. And speaking of top 40, you're hosting Up to Speed this afternoon
I am.
from 3 to 6.
Yes.
And I understand you got a bit of a top 40 kind of story.
I do, and it's about a song that I have been obsessed with, if you know me, lately. I play it all the time.
Your desk is right behind me, and
Yeah, there's some Beyonce going on there.
yeah.
So Beyonce, she recently became the first Black woman to top country music charts in the U.S. with her new single, Texas Hold'em. So what effects could her success have on the genre and other BIPOC country artists? We'll get more on that story on Up to Speed today. I'm really looking forward to that and looking forward to hearing Texas Hold'em once again.
If you really like Texas Hold'em, you remember the kids show Franklin? I don't know if you grew up with that.
I've heard the comparison being
It
made.
sounds very, very
It's-
similar.
It's the banjo.
It's the banjo. Yeah, not a direct copy, but don't have to worry about any lawsuits.
copyright
but it's
issues,
still
yeah.
it's still super fun. It's kind of interesting. Thank you very much, Chloe.
No
You
problem.
can catch Chloe this afternoon, Chloe Friesen, on Up to Speed from 3 to 6. That's a wrap for Radio Noon. Thanks to everyone who helped put together today's show. Travis Peterson, Dylan Longhurst, Nellie Gonzalez, Leif Larson. I'm Corey Funk in all week for Marjorie Dowhouse. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next, Unreserved. Have a good one.
Iconic music venue in Canada, an absolute milestone in the careers of musicians.